Hey Mason, how's it going?
Hey Jeff, nice to be here.
So I'm joined today by Mason McMullin. He's the VP of Revenue Operations at Alysio.ai. So first off, welcome. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and Alysio. So if you can tell me about a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, hey, great starter question. So, I ended up in RevOps as kind of a destination. I feel like that's kind of common for RevOps folks. Variety of skill sets can be utilized to end up in RevOps. Mine in particular was more of a technical to an operational route. I started out doing data warehouse architecture and moved into post-sales for a SaaS company doing implementations, and then was a consultant for a few years on the analytics and business intelligence side. And then I moved into operations from there. So it was kind of a natural progression from, customer-facing roles to more kind of internal customer-facing roles and did a lot of analytics within the RevOps space. And I joined Alysio back in February, and we're building what we like to call affectionately the ChatGPT for sales teams. So we've built a library of MCPs that connect to your GTM systems, your CRM, conversational intelligence, your calendar, pretty much any tool that you'd want to utilize for selling software. Generally speaking, connects to it, and you can ask questions in natural language. You can get insights and it all connects directly to your sources. So no weird transformation processes, no ETL, no data warehouses, just direct to the source and natural language interface. So that's what Alessio does, and it's exciting because it feels like we're kind of on the cutting edge of AI tech today. So it's been fun journey.
That's awesome. So one thing that's I'm thinking about is AI, MCP. It's really a way to connect like your applications all together to like an LLM chat layer. Do you envision, um, where do reps typically chat? Is it in Slack? Is it a desktop app or a Chrome extension? Like, what does that look like from your thesis on Alessio?
Yeah, I mean, we sit, as a web application, and we think that you can live in one place as a seller or as a sales leader. Like you shouldn't have to be bouncing between 10 or 15 different tools or 10 or 15 different tabs. We want to be the single interface for all of your GTM tools. So it's a place that you can do all of the things that you would normally do as a RevOps person or as a seller. You can, prospect, you can update your CRM, you can get all kinds of kind of real-time analysis based on kind of the things that are important to you. You can look up customer or prospect info, you can enrich data and create accounts as a RevOps person. So yeah, we want it to be the one-stop shop for all of the GTM actions.
Very cool. And if I remember right, you mentioned that you guys are celebrating your third year of incorporation, so happy birthday to you guys. And then, can you tell me a little bit about your revenue journey? Are you guys in the 0 to 1, the 1 to 10 phase, more to scaling? Like, where are you guys at?
Yeah, I mean, with the new version of the product we just released, it's been about 2 months now that we've gone to market with it. So we are kind of in the 0 to 1 for the new version of the product. Alessio, like I told you, has been around for 3 years, and we started kind of in the sales productivity space, and we moved into more of the kind of rev tech, kind of AI forward when we saw an opportunity. So, we're trying to be the most cutting edge, sales technology out there, and it's going well so far.
That is awesome. So in terms of your priorities today, where would you shift where do you think your priorities lie as, head of revenue operations in the business?
Yeah, I mean, we're focused a lot on just on automation. I mean, when you think about when I started in February to now, we went through kind of a tech migration phase where we were looking at and evaluating our existing technology. So we migrated CRM from HubSpot to Salesforce, and then we kept HubSpot for kind of marketing purposes and contact management. And we were using some other tech tools as well. So for us right now, it's about how do we get out to the most people to sell to. And so that means kind of a lot of automation on the outreach and prospecting side, having a lot of meetings, running a lot of trials. And for us as a small company, it's everyone is the go-to-market team. So, I'm sitting on demos and taking prospect calls and just kind of doing everything we need to get the brand awareness out there and to make money.
That's awesome. So thinking about your own use case, I'm imagining that your team dog foods or uses your own product internally.
Yeah, we drink our own champagne. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I
I
prefer
like
the
that.
champagne analogy to the dog food. The dog. I don't know where the dog food one came from, but that one needs to die.
I use that term when I worked at Google. We build all these products, and I think it's an engineering It's an
Hmm.
engineering term. Sometimes the things
For
taste
that
good,
one.
sometimes they don't.
Totally.
Okay, so I'd be curious about like some of the core use cases that you've been used and how that's unlocked productivity for you.
Yeah, I mean, using our own product is something that all of us are doing. I like to say, to our prospects that I don't really log into our CRM anymore. When I need to do something, I do it via Alysio. So, as a RevOps person, there's a lot of kind of tactical things that you're responsible for day to day, and a lot of that involves updating CRM or creating new uh, parts of an object or doing things within the tools that we use. So, I create contacts and accounts in using Alysio, update opportunities, stages, and most of the stuff that I can do, I can accomplish right through the platform. Our AEs use it for prospecting, for data enrichment, for call prep, and of course the low-hanging fruit of updating the CRM because every AE that I've ever talked to hates updating their CRM. So it makes it easy. Yeah, our use cases are tactical in nature. It's like what can we do with the platform and how far can we push it? And that helps kind of the cycle of what do we need to build into the product to make it better. And so, a few things that we've launched the last couple of weeks, we fully redid our back end to make it more efficient. Obviously, you want a fast product, but we also added suggested questions. So, customers that are starting out, that may not know what to ask, I feel like prompting is something that isn't talked about enough when we talk about RevTech and AI. It's like half the battle is knowing how to ask what you want to ask to get the response you need. And so we added suggested questions that are there for each persona, whether you're an AE or a CRO, you can just find a question that makes sense as a place to start and just go with it. And then, upcoming features that we're pretty excited about is the ability to schedule queries. So, the things that you need every week from a RevOps team, like whether it's analysis or, lists of deals that you need to follow up on. That stuff you can now do on an automated basis. So you put the query in once, you schedule it and have it run every week for you. So that way, you wake up and it's in your Alessio inbox.
So one thing I think about when it's planning season now, right? So businesses are planning headcount for next year. But in addition to just raw headcount, it's what roles are they in? And then what are those roles, what are their goals, right? So for example, a sales development function is all about qualified pipeline. So they only have the front end of the process of the sales motion, while there are your folks who are full cycle, they're prospecting and closing, and then there are sellers who are closing. So when you think about building that prompting muscle by role, because when I prompt, I'm giving it structure, right? So it's not just a question, it's who I am and what I want you to do. And then there's obviously a set of sub filters that are relevant to you. I'm curious how you go about training your org to even use your own tool. And then by extension, how do you take that to your customers?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, where I always start with prompting is the context, and I think that's something that is really important to think about right off the bat. Is like when you're asking yourself, like, what do I want to get out of this? You have to ask, what context do I need to give the LLM provider to give me the response that I want? And what I always tell our customers is, hey, like you can be as vague as you want, and LLMs are pretty good at kind of reading between the lines of context and filling in the gaps that you don't with the detail that you don't necessarily provide. But when you are vague, you have to expect the response is also going to be vague. So you kind of start with like, okay, how specific do I need to be? And if it's a general query, like one that I run pretty often is, look at my calendar for the week, prep me on my meetings, find out information about the people that I'm meeting with and maybe some interesting things about them or about the companies they work for. So I can be better prepared to go into a call, with knowledge, and that's always impressive to customers when you can come with something that's tangible. So that's kind of one approach. So I always start with like, do you want a specific response? Then you need to give a specific prompt. And like you were saying, Jeff, it's like you have to tell it who you kind of want it to act as and who you are coming to it as. So it's kind of meeting in the middle with the different roles. And I mean, it's always surprising how much you can get out of just a few tweaks to a query because something that might be a really vague response or that might invite hallucinations, God forbid LLMs are pulling things out of the air and giving them back to you as real information. Yeah, we do our best to make sure that doesn't happen, but the more you give it, the less likely it is to bring back something that makes absolutely no sense or that is completely made up.
So when it's sales rep, I'm thinking, down to the SQL layer when Salesforce, right? If you're querying your database, you're typically looking at open opportunities, leads in a specific status. You can train all of that. I think that makes sense. When you get to sales management and you care about like deal velocity metrics and win rate, sales cycles, things like that, you have to give the LLM definitions. Otherwise, it will use its general knowledge from the web or whatever knowledge source you give it, and it will start to hallucinate potentially and not get you what you want. Um, so when you think about AI, or when I think about it at least, it goes back to the fundamentals of revenue operations, which is giving it a data dictionary. Here's what we define as win rate. Here are our segments. Here is all the filtering and metadata that makes sense for querying that database. Um, how much time do you think, what would you encourage for folks who are trying to dabble in AI and trying to get reporting out of it? Because I can get summarization for calls, that seems straightforward. But when
Yep.
it comes to reporting and operating cadences and telling a story with data, that's much more difficult. I'm
Yeah,
curious how
it
you think about
is.
it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because every company obviously is going to report on things slightly differently, and everyone has a different setup of Salesforce that might need three or four different fields in aggregate to get to a bookings number. Like that's just a random example. The way the cool thing about the MCP technology, and for anyone listening that's never heard of the term MCP, just model context protocol. It's just a way for a system to take data from the source and to contextualize it in a way that the LLM can understand. And that's kind of how the Alysio platform works. And we're always kind of fine-tuning these MCPs so that they have additional, tools that they can access to do specific things, but also that so that the context that they're bringing back from the source is the best and most up-to-date context on your business. So we're trying to make it kind of this first mile, last mile. Like the platform itself is going to do that kind of first mile approach where it's going to go grab the data, and then based on what it knows from the data, it's going to try and contextualize that the best of its knowledge for the LLM, right? And then the second mile, I think, is what you're getting at, where it's like, how do you be specific enough with the LLM so that it knows exactly how it's supposed to bring this back for you and what format, what calculations. And we have a few ways that we can go about that. One of them is that actually another feature we just added today is some personalization stuff. So it's like if you have a specific role or some specifics that you want the LM to interact back to you with, then you can actually put those in. The other way that we kind of do it is, we have direct connectors for Drive, for SharePoint, for OneDrive as well. So if you have documentation that you run your business based on, if it's rules of engagement or policies and procedure documents, you can actually utilize those directly from where they're sitting as a source. So if they're sitting in Drive, you can actually have the LLM directly reference those documents. So it could pull calculations, it could pull specific processes you wanted to adhere to, and actually utilize that context for the answers that it's giving you. So it really is kind of a two-pronged approach. One, we want the MCPs to be the best at contextualizing based on what it sees within your environments, and it's pretty good at that. But then also give the ability for humans to kind of fill that last mile piece. And how we see that playing out in the future is kind of fully fleshed out internal MCPs where you could upload specific documents that you want contextualized across the entire business. Because right now it's a little less specific. You have to kind of tell it to go look at this document in Drive and have it contextualized against, but we want it to be as seamless as possible where an admin could upload any policy doc and have it contextualized for the entire organization.
So what you're describing is a RAG, right? Like a retrieve, augment, generate. So you give it source file, a vector database, or offline files, and it goes through all the documentation and identifies the relevant definitions and language around it. I often find revenue operations folders to be extremely messy, right? You have these sedimentary layers. So you have like RevOps from 5 years ago. They defined win rate one way or another. 3 years ago, maybe the org turned over. The new head of RevOps changed things again, but they didn't delete the doc. So when you point this parental folder and all the subfolders, you now have contradictions. And so I do envision like a place one day where we have to get clarity. And so a human in the loop to go configure, not just point to a body of documents, but say, I need a data label this, right? And so let me ask some intelligent questions to you that are canned for at least your specific function. If you're an AE or an SDR, like what are your qualification standards before you move from this metric from MQL to, a sales qualified lead if you're still using that framework. If you're an account executive, how do you move from, suspect to prospect, whatever language you're using, you still give it context. And that's old work, right? To me, that's classic revenue operations work, whether or not it's AI, because you still have to teach this newborn operations teammate, the AI agent, right? It's almost like you're hiring someone new. The AI agent is also learning. Eventually, they'll have mastery as your product matures and all that. So I think that's really, really interesting. I'm curious from your point of view, do you envision the RevOps teams of the future to be somewhat leaner, right? Like the leanest function already, the most overworked and underappreciated folks in a go-to-market function, in my opinion,
Totally.
are going to get leaner because the tools actually allow us to be leaner. I'm curious about, well, your stance on, ops, managing agents and workflows that do the work of half or one or two FTEs in the future.
Yeah, I mean that's the question, and I have strong opinions on this because from an ethical perspective, like I feel very strongly that AI should be augmentative to human beings and not replacement. I think the prevailing sentiment around the SaaS world for the last few years, from what I've seen, has been how do you do more with less? And we've seen companies making massive cutbacks, and there's been a lot of layoffs, and even folks coming out of college now are struggling to find jobs in tech, especially. And I think everyone's kind of in like this wait and see mode. Like, should we hire? Should we, build a tool? Should we buy a tool? And in between those kind of three choices, it's like sometimes things just aren't happening. So that's a kind of a way to just preface the response of, I mean, the reality is, yeah, teams will probably be leaner as technology gets better. Whether I think that's the right thing to do or not, I don't think that's the right thing to do. But I do think that the best folks working in RevOps will be the ones who are adaptable to the technology as it kind of evolves. And then that means being able to leverage it to do your job better. And I think that's what folks should be thinking about more than, is this tool going to replace me? It's how can I use this tool to make myself better at what I do and to advance myself. And that's a kind of it's kind of a non-response. But that's the way I kind of see it playing out. And I think those that are successful in RevOps roles will be the ones that can do it all and do more with less. But that's not anything new, and that's not necessarily a consequence of AI. It's just the market that we're in. It's a weird time.
So when we think about, and I agree with you on the philosophy of making it augmentative. But I think when you're able to do more with less, it just means you do also do not have to hire more potentially, especially in TAMs that are limited. Um, right. So then the surface area of who you can prospect into actually needs to grow from the product perspective, not necessarily from the GTM perspective. So okay, so use cases, I get, pre-call, post-call, summarization, pipeline metrics. Have you seen use cases around some of the more mundane components of the sales motion? So deal desk, for example, pricing, contracting, some of the more mid-sales cycle administrative components of the sales motion. Have you seen that with some of your prospects and your customer base?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, that's not really a space that we're necessarily playing in right now, at least, like although I honestly think if you're talking about overlooked functions in operations, deal desk and order operations are probably some of the most overlooked and valuable, especially when it comes to like large quantity order processing end of quarter type situations. Like you want people that know what they're doing in those positions. But yeah, I mean, and I've actually talked to several companies that are kind of looking to play in that space where it's like, how do you make that entire process, more streamlined and seamless? And that's what I kind of love about the AI tools that are coming out, nowadays, where it's like those sorts of really painful processes that require two or three tools and five or six people to manage can be helped and augmented by some of these AI tools. So I think there's a great application there for it. Any salesperson could tell you that getting an order signed is sometimes a huge pain. So I'm excited to kind of see what transpires in that area. Like and I honestly, like, from an Alysio perspective, there's a couple things that we're kind of thinking about, going forward, for especially for RevOps and for leaders especially. It's like, how do we how do we take, and this is a conversation that happens in every RevOps team, I think, and every team that I've been on in operations has always been like, how do we be more strategic? And I think AI is the pathway to being a more strategic resource. Like if you can automate some of the mundane, like you were talking about, whether it's in the order operations or deal desk side, or whether it's just in like the sales support side, letting RevOps be a strategic resource versus someone that's always just bogged down in data or bogged down in mundane tasks or not really adding value to the organization when it comes to maybe a top line perspective. RevOps is probably always going to be a cost center, but being able to like get deeper into the business and find more areas of opportunity, I think is something we're always thinking about. And along with that, it's like coaching and enablement, again, like underutilized function. Like, how do you know how to coach reps to be better? And that's what Alysio started out to do is like, how do we identify the activities that are driving success in a sales org? And we're still doing that with the new product. It's just a lot more streamlined. You can easily get insights about what your team is doing, how that's translating to success. And I think being able to kind of equip your enablement team with those real-time insights will be invaluable for companies going forward. So I think like that's exciting to me. Like all the functions that you might overlook or might think about even offshoring, it's like now they have tools that can make them better and more efficient and a more strategic resource versus just kind of being people that sit in the background and throw things into a repository and hope that the AEs will look at them. Like I think there's a huge opportunity.
Well, Mason, so one last question for you. What's one piece of advice that you'd like to leave for the go-to-market community?
Yeah, I mean, if I could say, one thing that I think has been successful, has made me successful in my career, that has kind of helped me on my journey to, what we're doing now, and there's a lot more to learn, but I think the thing that has like helped me the most is just, keeping that ability to learn and be curious, and to just, make yourself as sticky as possible in an organization. Like how do you look at your role and say, what can I do that's N plus one that makes me better, that makes me more valuable to the company. And for me, that's being curious, gathering knowledge about the company, making myself the redundancy for others. Like who's the next man up? If someone can point to me and say, Mason's the next guy that we want when this person leaves, the succession planning, like be that person. So I'd say be curious, be adaptable, be tech forward and learn everything you can about the organization that you're part of, and that will take you a long way.
So for those who want to learn more about you, where can they do so, and where can they learn more about Alysio?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all over LinkedIn. If we're connected, you probably see my ramblings or my hot takes every week. So yeah, Mason McMullin on LinkedIn, and Alysio is all over socials as well, but we're primarily on LinkedIn, and you can check us out at Alysio.ai.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Mason.
Yeah, Jeff, been great talking. Thanks, man.